wonderful day on this April 18th, 2024. This has been a tech talk that had been postponed, specifically in regards to using the Zero Trust IPSec VPN. So today I would kind of like to go over exactly what Zero Trust is, how we implement it on our Zyxel firewalls, and then also some extra things that we can do to help further implement Zero Trust in a network. So in the very beginning, let's talk about what our agenda is today. So we want to talk about first, what is Zero Trust? We want to talk about how we implement it with our IPSec, and then we want to talk about endpoint security using our device insight. So let's go ahead and begin and talk about what is Zero Trust. Now, Zero Trust is more of a strategy and a philosophy that's been adapted across all vendors when talking about how to secure their network. Now, as the name implies, Zero Trust basically means that we aren't going to trust connections that come in to our firewall automatically. So again, this is a philosophy that helps guide our security policies. And I can give you a great example of this, and that's basically IPSec, where we see this a lot. So with IPSec VPN, you have a client-to-site VPN where a remote user connects into your work network place. With that IPSec VPN client, there usually is some safeguards using encryption algorithms to encrypt the traffic, and then there's also the pre-shared key that allows the authenticated user to, or the authentication of that particular client, to have access to network resources. So on top of that, we have that security policy where we look at specifics such as the pre-shared key and then also the encryption algorithm. The user has to have that information in on their IPSec client for us to be able to authenticate that connection. So that's the basics when it comes to IPSec, but what we can do is we can actually do a little bit more than that in order to help authenticate that particular user. So in a Zero Trust strategy, what we want to do is we want to add a second layer of security, which is going to be our two-factor authentication. And the reason why we want to talk about, or the reason why we want to have two-factor authentication is because if a user has their laptop and something happens to that laptop, a bad actor gets a hold of that laptop, or they are able to remote into that particular machine or that laptop, the IPSec VPN clients are set up so that they can automatically dial. Well, now we have a bad actor that has access to that VPN, and they're able to authenticate and get in and steal resources. So we want to prevent that by using a Zero Trust strategy. So with that strategy, that means that all users are going to be authenticated. So as they come into the VPN, we have a two-factor authentication where they have to have a second set of credentials to authenticate as a user. So we can implement that on our IPSec VPN. And then also, we want to tighten up our security on the firewall itself. And that basically means that we're going to only allow access to where access is needed for that particular user. So after they authenticated and they've come in, under normal circumstances, when we create VPNs, normally we would just set up the whole network that they have access to. So they come in on the VPN and they have full range to a specific subnet where maybe their computer is, or maybe a printer or specific resources. What we want to do is we want to also tighten that security down so that they only have access to what's needed. So they only can access their computer if they need to have access to a file server, or if they need to have access to a printer. And then on top of that, you can add extra layers of security, like on your file server, that's set up outside of what we have on our firewall, but maybe on your file server, you set additional modes of authentication so that they have to authenticate another time as well. So it's all about trying to make sure that we trust no one coming in until they authenticate and prove themselves to be who they say they are. So when it comes to IPSec Zero Trust, we want to deploy stronger encryption algorithms. So we do have that in our IPSec VPN client. We do have higher encryption algorithms that we can deploy to make sure that the traffic is encrypted and it's got a stronger encryption. Of course, we have our 2FA for VPN access. We have two modes for VPN 2FA access. We can set up an email that is sent to the user to authenticate them. So that's what we use 2FA. And then finally, again, reiterating on tighter rules, allowing VPN access to the resources the user needs, and only those resources to make sure that they're only going where they are allowed to go. And then finally, what we'll talk about at the very end is a form of endpoint security as an additional layer using what's called device insight on the USG Flex and ATP firewalls. So device insight is going to help us authenticate the users based on specific information on their OS that we can use in order to make sure that that particular user is a trusted user. All right, so let's talk about how we implement it with IPSec. So this is why we want to use 2FA, because what happens if you have your password and it's not strong enough to prevent it from being stolen? Someone may be looking over your shoulder, or if someone is able to get in and do a phishing attack and then try to get that information, if your pre-shared key is stolen and they have the encryption algorithm, they can then spoof as if they were you and come into your network over the VPN. So just having the password and having strong authentication is not going to be enough to prevent, an attacker from getting in. So that's why we have two-factor authentication. So with two-factor authentication, once the user does have the proper pre-shared key and encryption algorithms, gateways then send an authentication link to the user's email. We have SMS that's available. However, we have since kind of shuttered this version because of with SMS, it requires a third-party service where you actually have to charge, and they charge you based on the SMS sent. So even though that is an option on the firewall, we really don't recommend using it. We recommend using the email method. So what ends up happening is that once the user connects to the VPN, they're not granted access until they're able to authenticate and provide proof that they are who they say they are. So they'll enter in a username and password for that particular user that pops up on their IPSec VPN client. Then after they enter that information, they'll get sent an email, and that email is actually linked to the account that you set up in the firewall. They click on that link to submit a key before the expiration time. And the expiration time, I believe, default is about 3 minutes. So this is just extra layers of security that we have on top of being able to authenticate with using the pre-shared key and encryption algorithms. They have to enter in additional information and prove they are who they say they are. That way, we can then trust them after they have entered this information in. So this was added on 5.10 firmware on the standalone version of the firewall. So we do support that on the latest version of our firewalls in standalone mode. And we also support this in Nebula as well. So with Nebula, you can create your own username and password for your VPN users. And then additionally, in standalone, you can do the same. So in terms of the setup, basically what ends up happening again is the user connects with the IPSec VPN tunnel. They are then asked to authorize themselves. They'll get sent an email bound to that account, and then they can click on that email, and then they're automatically authenticated. And then they have access to the resources that it's set up in your policy for the firewall. So for setting it up for IKEV2, what we have here is here's IKEV1 and here's IKEV2. All you need to do is set up extended authentication protocol, okay? So when you are setting up your gateway section in the firewall, there is an advanced option that says extended authentication. You enable the extended authentication, and then you choose how you want to set it up. You can either use server mode, you can use the AAA, or you can use your radius, or you can set your allowed user. You can just set up your multiple users and put them in a group and put them as the allowed users in that group. And then you simply enable two-factor authentication. So after you've created your VPN, you can turn this on. That way, you can have the extended authentication set up. Next, what you'll have to do is create your users locally and enter in their email. So under configuration, object, user group, and when you add a user, you can simply create the user for the VPN, and then you put their email address here in the bottom, okay? So what that basically means that when they authenticate, it will be sent, when they authenticate with their user, it will be sent to their email address in this section here. And then you also need to remember to enable two-factor authentication. So when you go to the auth method on your firewall, under auth method, you'll see two-factor authentication, and then you set up your two-factor authentication for your services, and then you set in the valid time for that authentication link. So again, by default, the valid authentication time is 3 minutes. However, you can make this a lot shorter or longer based on your needs. So that basically means that once they authenticate with their username and password and they get the link, they have this amount of time to click on that link to validate themselves as a user. Otherwise, they will have to reconnect again. Now, as far as creating the auto provisioning, we suggest that you set up your auto provisioning so that it makes it easier to download the configuration to the VPN client. So we do support auto configuration or auto provisioning for the configuration for the VPN client if you are using our IPSec client. So that's found under configuration, VPN, IPSec, and configuration provisioning. So after you've created your client-to-site VPN in the firewall, we can then set it up so that what happens is that we can have the clients open up their IPSec VPN client, put in the IP address or host name of where the firewall is hosted, and then enter in their credentials, their username and password, and it will download the configuration directly to their IPSec client. So with your configuration provisioning, what you'll need to do is type in or actually select the VPN tunnel that you're going to be using. So in this example, in the screenshot, we have the remote access wizard that was created using the wizard VPN. And this is going to be the authentication that we're adding. So we're client authentication based off of that particular VPN client setup. Okay. Down here at the bottom, we can then add what users are going to be able to pull that configuration down. So if we want all of our users, we would just put that user group that we've created that has all of our users set up for our extended authentication. We would put that in the allowed user list. Now, on the client side, when you open up your IPSec VPN client, you go to configuration, hit the option to get from server, and then type in the address of the firewall. So if the firewall has a host name tied to it or a dying DNS, you will put that in as the gateway address. Your authentication is going to be the login plus password, so the user and then the password for that particular user. Okay, and then once you've done that, it will go through and start requesting the information, and if all the credentials are set up properly, it will then create the configuration for you within the IPSec VPN, and all you would need to do is click on Open Tunnel. Now, once you click on Open Tunnel, what will happen is you will get an additional pop-up that will require you to enter in your username and password, okay? And after that comes up, and then you'll get an email with a link to then authenticate yourself or prove that you are who you say you are based off of that particular user that's tied to the email address. And that way we can have that 2FA authentication on the VPN client. So now let's talk about device insight, which is our endpoint security that we can use. So what we can do with device insight is when a device connects to the network, you know, you're exposed to a lot of different things on that particular network, but we can collect the information as to what that device is and create a fingerprint and use that fingerprint in order to determine if that device is allowed or not. So what we can do is a role-based device insight endpoint security. Instead of using the IP address it comes from, we can use the OS version and the manufacturer of that particular device. So we can look at the computer, we can see the OS version, and we can tell if it's a phone, a computer, or any other device like an IP camera or a printer. So that's what device insight can do. So we can collect the information on devices that are connected in the data or that are connected to the firewall, and then we can create policies based off of that. So under configure or under monitor, under network status and device insight, we can see all the information of all the devices that are connected to the firewall, okay? Now, let's just say that we want to manage the devices that are coming in or connecting in. In this example, we just basically have, you know, clients that are directly connected to this, but we can also apply the same thing to our VPN tunnel. We can see what the OS is, and we can see what the device is itself connecting in. So we can create a policy and create a profile based on what we believe or what we need to connect in. So for instance, if we have a bunch of clients that are only using Windows PCs or Windows laptops, let's say that you are the IT administrator and you give your users a Windows-based laptop for them to travel with. Well, then we can set up a policy that looks for that particular device and then allow them in on the VPN tunnel. So we can put the category as computer, and then we can put the operating system as Windows. And then once we've done that, we can go to and create an object for the device insight. So if we go to configuration, object, and device insight, what we then can do is create our profile for those Windows machines. Okay, so under configuration, object, device insight, we click on add, we can choose the category for the operating system and then create the policy for that particular Windows device. So here we have Windows, we have a computer, we have it set to Windows for that particular profile, okay? Next, what we can do is this is where we can tighten our rules and add our endpoint security for that particular device. On our IPSec VPN tunnel, we have our firewall here under the policy control. So under our tunnel right here, we have our IPSec VPN tunnel. What we can do for the IPSec VPN tunnel is we can add that device in the IPSec VPN tunnel for the rule. So that basically means that once they are connected, we can then allow them based on the OS that they're using, okay? So here we just have the basic generic rule. Here we have Windows allow. Ignore the source and destination here right now because usually when you're doing for IPSec, it will be listed as IPSec, but excuse me, we can tighten the rule and says, you know, anything coming from anywhere, and it's coming from, let's say that this is the IPSec rule that we're creating. We're saying, you know, from any to IPSec or IPSec to any. What we can then do is set the source as any, the destination as, say, a web server that we're having access or allowing access to for that particular VPN user, okay? The service is any, but the device we can now choose as Windows, right? And then we can set it to allow. So that basically means that once they're connected to VPN, we can then say, if you have a Windows-based machine, you can access this resource at this particular IP address. So the device insight allows us to use and leverage endpoint security and able to prevent users that have unauthorized access from accessing a device based off of their OS, okay? So once it's done, you can actually see it in the list. We'll see it, you know, right here, server block, and then we have with the IP address, the server, the user, so on and so forth, but it will be entered into the firewall rule. Additionally, if we want to, we can actually go to the device insight list, and if there is a device that we don't recognize, we can actually select it and block it. So we can then, you know, make this more tighter, and we can actually see what's being connected and then determine if that user is the correct user to connect into our network, and then we can block it if we need to. So now we can actually do it to a block list. We can block the MAC address, and then we can also show in the CLI the block list as devices are being blocked. We can also remove a device from the block list if we determine that it is a legit user. We can also edit the device insight list. So if there is a device, you can instead of looking at the MAC address and you know who it is, we already have the host name, we can actually put a description on that particular device in the device insight as well, just so that we have an idea of what's being connected inside the network on the VPN tunnel. If you want to, you can actually download the list from the device insight list directly to your PC, so that you have an external list that you can refer to if you need to. If you're troubleshooting or need to troubleshoot with our tech support team, they will probably most likely ask you for this information to get an information as to your device insight list, and then our Zyxel support team can look at this and help with any issues you might be having with device insight. And then finally, we have our device insight status. We can see if the device is online. If it's not detecting the traffic for over 10 minutes, it's showing that it's offline. This icon means it's blocked. And then also we have our CDR, which is our collaborative detective response. We can actually use the CDR to block a specific device based on CDR policies. Okay, so what we can do here also is if you have a device that's connected to a specific access point, we can link to that particular AP so we can see that access point and then get information about that access point as well. Okay, and then finally here we want to add a device to the block list. So this is how you would do it. So you would go to the device list, and then we can go to the category and the log, and then we can see that device in the device list. I'm sorry, let me go back to that slide really quick. So in the logs, for the device insight log, if we want to add it, we can just look at that list, and then we can see the device right here. We can grab the MAC address and then we can add that back to the list if we need to, okay? So overall, what we can do again here with our IPSec Zero Trust is first, we can enable the 2FA in order to make sure that our users are authenticating a second time to authenticate their identity, to see who they are, to ensure that they are the correct person they say they are. Then secondly, after doing the two-factor authentication, we can use Device Insight in order to do some little bits of endpoint security in order to ensure that those devices are going where they're supposed to based on the firewall rules. Okay? So I'll go ahead and open up the floor for any questions that you may have in regards to the Zero Trust IPSec VPN.
Yes, thank you, Marcus, for that short but sweet presentation. But before I read the first question, can you check on your chat and maybe you can answer that. All right, first question, can you do more granular endpoint security, such as the build of the operating system that connects instead of just the OS version?
As of right now, no. We haven't implemented the ability to look at the build, so we can't differentiate between Windows 11 or Windows 10 or even older. However, that's going to be enhanced in the future so that we will be able to add more profiles instead of having an all-encompassing OS, so that way we can look at specific OS versions.
Okay, great. If firewall loses internet connection, how to MFA let admin to log in? Let's admin to log in.
I'm assuming the question is, if you lose connection, how can you authenticate with 2FA? Well, unfortunately, if you are trying to connect into the VPN and you've lost internet connection, then there's no real way for you to really connect anyways. So if you lose connection during the process, you'll just have to try it again and wait till that the 2FA authentication comes in via email.
All right, next question. Will SSL be supported for VPN in Nebula?
As of right now, it looks like we are phasing out SSL VPN mainly because it is the least secure out of IPSec and L2CP. I know that a lot of people like to use SSL VPN because of the ease of use. However, we have made more strides in making IPSec and L2CP a little bit more friendly, specifically using our built-in wizard on the standalone mode of the Flex and the ATP. The wizard will allow you to quickly create a VPN connection, and then it creates a script that can be downloaded or emailed to the user so that they just run the script and will automatically use the built-in IPSec VPN on the Windows machine and Mac OS as well. So you don't have to use the IPSec VPN client. However, the IPSec VPN client does give you a little bit more freedom and a little bit more extra options, such as having an auto RDP based on connection. And what I mean by auto RDP is, let's just say that you have a user, they connect up the VPN tunnel. The moment it connects up, it automatically initiates an RDP connection to a resource that's tied to that particular user. So that's one of the advantages of using the IPSec VPN client versus the built-in Windows IPSec VPN via the script.
All right. Next question. Do you have a best practice link or guide we can publish to staff? Or will this video be downloadable? As I said earlier, I'm sorry, Marcus, let me, I'm just going to answer the second question. Yes, the video will be on YouTube, but it's not downloadable, but you can watch it. Go ahead, Marcus.
Additionally, if you want some like walkthroughs on how to set up the granularity or how to set up the IPSec VPN from scratch, what I can have you do is just email me. My name, email address is my name, Marcus H, MARCUS H @Zyxel.com. Shoot me an email, and then I can send you over the walkthroughs that we have published on setting up VPN tunnels.
Okay, another question. How is this will be different on USG Flex H series firewalls?
So right now, as you may have already guessed, the USG Flex H's right now, they're still relatively new and there are some features that are missing. However, we have an update that is about to take place this month for the Flex series. That is going to add more improvements. Eventually, we will have parity, one-to-one parity, specifically with our USB Flex and ATPs. So we're looking to have everything matching up and having all the same features no later than October of this year. It could come a lot sooner than that, but that's the schedule for that right now. So we will have device insights. We'll have pretty much the same thing that you see here in the standalone version on the Flex H series, but it should be no later than October to have that one-to-one parity between the Flex and the Flex H.
Awesome. How does device insight determine the device information?
We use the information on the application, not the application layer, but in the OSI layer. We can gather that information because it is sent in the packet, and then we also can use some back-end catalogs as well to determine that information for the profiles to make it. Okay,
more questions coming in. Do these appliances support FIPS 142 for all tunnels, 140-2?
We've had this question. I think we've had this question before, but I'll double check and look into that and get back to you on that. If you can, just email me that information and I can provide you the response that we got from our engineers over at HQ.
Awesome. And I guess that would be, we have, let's see here. We have one more and I sent it to Chet. Marcus, can you check it real quick?
Yeah, let me pull that up real quick. Let's see what's the new one. I believe it was the first question about the 2FA, I believe, right?
Correct.
Yeah, I can understand the question. Yeah, I can understand the question. The question is using 2FA won't help much if a bad actor has the laptop and can somehow log in. That comes down to making sure that the email address has your email is set up with 2FA as well. So using some type of 2FA, whether it be some kind of Google Authenticator for a phone or some other means, as long as you have some type of authentication on your email, that's another thing that I would suggest that you do as well, or using the Google Authenticator. So if a bad actor has a hold of your phone and your laptop, there's nothing we can do about that. But yes, that's just one of the things when it comes to 2FA. 2FA can only go so far, but if your laptop is password protected, you always want to do that. You always want to put 2FA on your laptops and all your devices as well. So in reality, if a bad actor gets hold of that and there's no security to prevent them from accessing these things, then yes, of course, the 2FA won't do much.
Thank you, Marcus. Okay, next question. Does Device Insight put a lot of overhead on the device?
No, not really. I mean, it's the processing that it does to kind of go through and look at what devices are coming in is very minuscule when it comes to the actual processing power and what's required of the firewall to do that. Our engineers were very, very, they were looking into a way to implement this without causing an impact to performance. So you should not see any performance drop when using Device Insight.
All right, I guess that would be the last question. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Marcus, before we sign off?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. There's one more question that came in. Is using the Google Authenticator for 2FA on the VPN thing? But yes, it is. We use both. A lot of people sometimes don't like to use the Google Authenticator, but let's just say that some people don't like downloading extra apps on their phone. We have run into that instance, and that's why we've come up with the email authentication method as well. But yes, the 2FA using the Google Authenticator is staying. We're not getting rid of that.
Awesome. All right. Marcus, do you want to add?
So,
before
yeah, definitely. So, again, email me, Marcus H, MARCUSH @Zyxel.com for any other questions. If you need links to some of the walkthroughs that we have, I will send that out. And then I'll also get back to that, the attendee who was asking about the FIPS. Definitely email me about that, and I can provide you with the information on that after the webinar is over. Please look forward to the next webinar we're going to be doing next month, or I will be doing next month. So it's going to be something that I'm quite sure that a lot of people are going to be wanting to attend. So it's a little bit of a surprise. So just be on the lookout.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody. And thank you for this interactive webinar. We appreciate your questions and we'll see you on our next webinar. Have a great weekend. Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.